Yo, what is up guys? It's the Goblin and welcome back to another Fortnite Battle Royale tips and tricks video. In this video, I've written down quite a few notes about 4 things that are kind of in-depth tips, and we're going to go in-depth into these areas and talk about how to get more solo wins and how to improve at this game. The background gameplay here is a pretty nice solo win with a decent amount of kills, so stick around to the end to watch for that, 'cause it's a pretty good gameplay with a nasty finish because of just the way the end fight lasts forever and it's a crazy epic ending. Also, drop a like on this thing. I would very much appreciate if we could go for 2,000 likes. I know it's quite a bit to ask for. You guys have been killing it with the support lately, so 2,000 likes would mean the absolute world to me if we could hit that. And then, of course, a huge shout out to the notification squad. Hit that bell right beside when you subscribe. And also, shout out to everyone using my supporter creator, the Goblin YT in the item shop. New skins came out earlier today, or maybe yesterday by the time you guys are seeing this video. But new skins are always coming out. Support me in the item shop. I do appreciate that. So let's get right into this and let's talk about these 4 areas that I think will really help people improve in solo wins. Now, I may have touched on a few of these things before, but I'm going really in depth, and I like I said, these are written in my iPhone notes, so we're about to read them out and we're about to talk about these things. Now, first tip is that I wrote down is knowing the time limit on a fight and moving from fight to fight. Now, I see a lot of people, a lot of players in general, the reason why a lot of people die is because of third party. You're getting overrun by multiple players. Happens to me, happens to anyone from the worst of players to the best of players, because that's just, it's going to be tough to fight off multiple enemies. But my tip right here, from moving to fight and knowing the time limit on a fight, is very important in a solo match. What I mean by this is, for example, at the end of this video, you guys are going to see I come into a 1v1 and I take my time. I control high ground on him. I lose the high ground for a second. I get the high ground back off. I block off his grapples because I know if I'm in a 1v1, I have nothing else to worry about. The time limit on that fight is until someone dies, right? However, if I'm fighting early game like you see in this video in Retail Row, and I'm fighting up against multiple enemies, I think I get like 4 or 5 kills in like a split second there in Retail Row. I think it's like 4 kills because of the fact that I know the time limits on that fight is a lot smaller because I'm in a lot more populated area. Third parties, fourth parties, fifth parties are rushing me, and that's why it's important to know the time limit on a fight, so that if you are fighting in an area where you have a good chance of getting third partied or something, you need to make sure you guys are finishing off that fight quick, and also making sure you're not exposed to other sides. So if the fight's taking longer, you want to make sure you're covering your sides so you don't get third party sniped and different stuff like that. And when you do, if you don't have much of a time limit on a fight, if you hear 2 or 3 enemies around and you get that first crack in, you kind of just have to go for the finish. And even if it's like a 50-50 shot, sometimes you have to push the fight because you have to know the time limit and know how much time you have before you're about to get third partied. Another tip with that is moving from fight to fight, and this is key because when you do fight people off and you're fighting against multiple enemies, you're probably going to take some damage. So being able to have potions in your inventory ready to go, box up, take high ground, box, shield real quick, and then fight off the other enemy is a major key. You'll see the best of players, they fight off multiple enemies at once, but it's usually they'll maybe win 2 gunfights, take some damage, build up high ground, heal, then drop it back down. Taking your time, knowing your time with the fight, and being able to transition from fight to fight seamlessly by grabbing the loot, grabbing the important stuff like materials, and protecting yourself is a very important key. Now, this is a tip that's something that I can talk about, but it's a lot easier to, like I said, you can watch the gameplay and see how I do it, and also, you have to practice and implement it to your own gameplay. My next tip here is baiting people to low ground and knowing how to fight from the low ground, different tactics or reasons why you'd want to do that. Now, the majority of the time, you're going to want to get the high ground. The player with the high ground has the advantage in most of the fights. However, sometimes you might be out of materials. You might the enemy's already like 4 stories above you or up on a mountain, and you don't have a grapple gun to close that gap or a jump pad or anything like that. It's kind of tough when you're building up to players that will just camp on the high ground. So against those sort of players, what I like to do is, instead of building up and trying to block off my head and they might get a few free shots in just because of the angle, I like to bait the players to the low ground, and this is a lot easier than you think. Baiting people to the low ground is fairly easy. If you go low and you box up with a pyramid above your head, they're usually going to think you're pretty weak and try to rush you, even if they haven't, fought you off before, or if they're coming into third party that fight. Other things that you can do to bait people to the low ground would be you smacking, if you pull out your pickaxe and start smacking the builds, that will usually scare a lot of people to drop down. You can do the same thing by shooting the builds or doing it with the deagle, and different tips like that are stuff that people don't talk about as much because everyone always just says, oh, get the high ground, easy, get the high ground. but we got to be real, and no matter how good of a player you are, there's going to be scenarios where you don't have mats or where you can't get the high ground, and you have to learn to fight from the low ground. And the key with fighting from the low ground is not always, you can be on the low ground looking up and fighting someone above you, edit the roof above you, get some shots, and that works occasionally, but it's a lot easier when you bait them down to your level. And one thing that I like to do that's a classic is if they're way up above you, like 5 stories up, you start smacking that build, pickaxing it, they drop down to the same story as you box in, and then you go up above them, and you sort of, you switch positions with them because of outsmarting them. And that's why, skills, your ability to shoot and build are huge in this game, but the third huge thing is decision making, and that's, we're talking a lot about in this video. So that's what I would say. Learn to fight off the low ground and learn to bait enemies down to the low ground, because it's a scenario that you might have to, win some fights like that in real game scenarios. My next thing is the weapon, and my next tip here is that I want to talk about is weapon and item selection, depending on the point in game and the scenario. Fast looting will come from experience and making quick decisions. So the first part of this tip is know what guns you like. Know that you like the pump shotgun over the heavy. For me, I like, if it's a green pump, I'll take the heavies over. If it's a blue pump, I'll take it over the heavy shotguns. Know what, I take the purple AK over a blue AR. Different stuff like that, I know that, and that's my personal preference, so that if I see that gun, it's just muscle memory or a quick reaction to know what to pick up and to know which items to use. Other things about item selection and scenario I would say would be, for example, if you're in the top 5 or top 3, you probably don't want to have a med kit or, a chug jug in that last section, because you probably won't get the chance to get it off. It would be better to have something like a sniper, an RPG, or a grapple gun. This goes into points on different stuff. Also, if I'm early game and there's a med kit or a 50 pot there, I might carry that expecting to take some damage late game because I'm going to be fighting. I might take those over a sniper rifle or a grapple gun. A lot of people always say, why do you leave sniper rifles? It's because I know in myself, I'm decent with a sniper rifle and I'll use it, but I'd rather take 5 minis or a grapple gun or a grenade launcher or 2 med kits if I'm early game. If I'm late game, I might take the sniper there because, I would have less of a chance to use that. It's all about knowing the scenario, knowing where you're at and what you're going to be fighting around, to know what sort of items, your inventory that you have in the first second of the game. Ideally you'd like to have all gold stuff or whatever and be kind of similar, but it's going to be different than the inventory you have late game, and it's sort of like a story battle royale. So throughout the game, you're trying to ramp up that inventory and making sure that, you have quick decision making so you can quickly loot, and knowing which weapons you like over other stuff, and knowing the scenarios also. For example, if I took the tactical shock, I don't use the tac anymore. I really think pumps are the go-to now, but back in the day, if I used the tac, I would not run a submachine gun because I wouldn't really need it. You wouldn't have to go pump to sub. I would just spray them down with the tac. If I ran the pump, I would run with the submachine gun. Different stuff like that, knowing that and basing your inventory around things like that. For example, back in the day, the double barrel, if I had that, I'm way more likely to pick up a grapple gun, right? Different things like that are very important to know. Knowing your strengths and weaknesses and what sort of items you want to have is a major key. Next thing I have here, and this is for the fourth or the last tip and trick we're going to talk about. This is about building materials, and I noticed that whenever I'm winning in games, it's because I'm taking a second. I like to analyze gameplays, and I like to not only analyze why I'm losing games, but why I'm winning games. And a lot of the reasons when I was looking at games that I win, it was because around, I'll fight and I'll loot and all that stuff in the early mid game. But when I get to a point around 30 to 15 left, somewhere around there, 15 to 30 left, that's when you need to go and start farming materials, because going into late game, especially in 2019 with Builder Pro and the quick edits, everyone, the average player can build at a crazy rate compared to what they could 6 months ago or even a couple months ago. So making sure that you have materials is a major key. And I always see, people always ask me like, wow, you're good, man, you got 800 mats. No, I want to have like 1k plus, at least about 1200, 1300 going into the top 5, top 10 scenario, because you never know, you might run up against a bush and just kill them, but you might run up against Tfue and you might be in a crazy build fight or someone super duper good, so you need to have those materials ready to go. So that's one thing that I noticed is in that mid game, I like to play aggro, I like to, fly around, complete challenges, rush people, but you need to always stop and say, hey, if I want a chance at winning this end game, I need to farm up. And that's what I wrote down. When the game slows down, everyone knows that portion where it's like, okay, we were just dealing with a bunch of action, the game's slowing down, I can't really find anyone, we're moving in slowly with the storm. That's when you you make the most of that and you farm up. And also with farming, you should know what stuff is good to farm. For example, certain type of trees are better, less hits for more mats, fences are good, the wooden pallets and different things like that. Another thing that I wrote down is once you max off, I usually try to have 999 wood because wood's the easiest material to farm going into the late game, but it's also nice to have steel and brick, and especially when a couple things. Now, if you have 999 of one material, you probably want to use that if you're not like totally towards the end game, because the fact that when you do kill someone and you loot off them, you're gonna, if you're 999 and they dropped 500 wood, obviously you won't be able to pick up any. But if you had just used 500 wood in that fight instead of using something else, then you're able to pick up that and max that back out. And another thing is that I think is a major key with you guys know how much I preach early rotations late game, and a lot of stuff that's annoying, when you base up and you get that early rotation, people can shut you down with different things, RPGs, blowing up your base, different stuff like that. But what I like to do is I always make that, when I'm early rotating late game, I'm talking like top 7 here, top 10, I'm gonna build, if I have enough metal, I'm gonna build a metal or a steel base, just because it takes like 20 or 25 seconds for it to completely set in, but it's so much more secure than you're gonna have with a wood base or a brick base. And trust me, so many games I win just off the fact of that. Switching materials, for the most part, you just have a manual and auto switch and just use wood and stuff. But late game, or when you're basing up, that's when the actual material, when you have time for it to set in, that's when it actually matters. And that's a tip I would say for that. So hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. Like I said, these are 4 things that are kind of tips, more in-depth stuff to focus on, practice, and hone in on your gameplay that will definitely improve, getting more solo wins and improve as a player once you guys can master these things. And stuff that I got to work on still every day. Everyone out there has ways to improve, no matter how good or bad you are in the game, and hopefully these tips will help you guys out. Drop a like, subscribe if you guys are new. Have a great night, and I'll see you guys in the next one. I'm out. Peace.